Welcome to Noha's narrative, where everything feels real and something hides deeper. The Tyrant of Floor Nine, the office on the ninth floor of Holloway and Grant Communications, smelled like fresh coffee and old fear. Every morning when Richard Holloway stepped out of the elevator, something in the air changed. The Tyrant of the Floor Nine, the office on the ninth floor of Holloway and Grant Communications, smelled like fresh coffee and old fear. Every morning when Richard Holloway stepped out of the elevator, something in the air changed. Shoulders stressed and eyes dropped to the screens. Keyboards clicked faster than they needed to. Richard was the branch manager, and he wore that title like a crown he had carved himself. He was not a tall man, but he carried himself like someone who believed the ceiling was built specifically for him. His suits were pressed to perfection, his hair never out of place, and his voice, that sharp, cutting voice, had a way of filling a room and emptying it of all warmth at the same time. Priya Nair arrived at her desk 18 minutes early that Tuesday morning. She always came early, she stayed late, she double-checked her reports, triple-checked her numbers, and still somehow found herself on the wrong end of Richard's moods at least 3 times a week. She had placed the quarterly budget summary on his desk before 8. By 8:15 he was standing at her workstation, holding the papers like they offended him personally. "What is this, Priya?" It was not a question. It never was. She looked up carefully. "The question 3 budget summary, Richard. You requested it yesterday afternoon. I requested a clean, readable document. This." He dropped it on her keyboard. "Looks like something first year intern threw together between lunch and a nap. The columns are misaligned. The totals on page 3 do not match the figures on page 1. Priya took a slow breath. "The figures on page 3 reflect the revised numbers from the finance department. They sent the update at 6 yesterday evening. I included both for reference so you could see the comparison." Richard tilted his head. A thin smile crossed his face, the kind that meant he was about to say something yet already decided. "So your solution to a confusing document was to make it more confusing. Brilliant. Really am surrounded by brilliant minds every single day." Donna Marsh, the receptionist, kept her eyes fixed on her monitor from across the open floor. She had learned long ago that looking up during these moments only made things worse. 2 junior staff members near the window pretended to be very interested in their phones. Priya did not look away from Richard. I will reformat it and have a clean version on your desk within the hour. Make it 30 minutes, and Priya, if I have to come back here again about something this basic, we are going to have a very different conversation. Understood?" She nodded once. He straightened his jacket and walked away without another word, pausing only to tell Donna to hold his calls and to make sure the conference room smelled less like whatever she had been eating. Donna said nothing. She simply nodded and reached quickly for her phone. By 9 o'clock, the office had settled back into its usual rhythm. The rhythm of people working hard and speaking softly and hoping Richard would stay in his glass-walled office for as long as possible. Priya reformatted the document in 22 minutes. She placed it on his desk without knocking. She had been working at this company for 6 years. She had been under Richard's management for 2 of them. In those 2 years, she had received no promotion, 2 formal warnings for things that were not her fault, and approximately 0 moments of genuine recognition. She sat back at her desk and opened her next task. She was not a woman who gave up easily. That was the one thing Richard had never managed to take from her. At 10:15, the elevator doors opened and a man none of them recognized stepped onto the 9th floor. He was older, perhaps late 60s, with silver hair and calm, steady kind of presence that somehow made the noisy office feel quieter. He wore a simple grey suit, not expensive looking but very clean. He carried no briefcase, only a single folded paper in his hand. He walked to Donna's desk with a pleasant expression and said, "Good morning, my name is James Whitfield. I have an appointment for the Senior Communications Director position." Donna checked the calendar. She found the name, she smiled and picked up the phone to let Richard know. From inside his glass office, Richard looked through the partition at the man standing at reception. His expression shifted, not to welcome, but to something closer to amusement. He came out slowly, looked James Whitfield up and down once, and said, "You are here about the direction position." "That is correct," James said. Richard smiled did not reach his eyes. "Coming then, let us see what you have got." A strange old gentleman, James Whitfield, followed Richard into the glass-walled office and sat down in there across from the desk. Not quickly, not nervously, but with the kind of ease that belongs to someone who has sat in many rooms far more important than this one. Richard dropped into his armchair, leaned back, and looked at the older man the way someone looks at a puzzle they have already decided is not worth solving. So Richard began folding his hands on the desk. "James Whitfield, tell me about yourself." James placed his folded paper on the desk, not sliding it, not handling it over eagerly, just sitting it down calmly. "I have spent over 4 decades in communications and brand strategy. I have built departments from the ground up, managed teams across multiple countries, and guided companies through some of their most difficult transitions." Richard picked up the paper, glanced at it for approximately 4 seconds, and set it back down. 4 decades, repeated, in the tone people use when they are repeating something they find slightly ridiculous. "That is a long time, a very long time." "It is," James agreed pleasantly. "And in those 4 decades you kept up with everything, the digital shift, social media, short-form content, influencer strategy, all of it I did." Richard tilted his head. "See, here is my concern, James. This role is not a retirement project, it is the fast-moving, high-pressure work. We need someone who understands where the industry is going, not where it has been." James looked at him with calm, attentive eyes. "I understood both." Richard smiled, that same thin smile from the morning. "With respect, someone your age tends to understand the past very well. The future is a younger person's game." There was a short silence. Donna, passing by with a stack of folders, slowed her steps slightly without meaning to. Priya seated at her desk with a clear sight line to the glass office and stopped typing. James Whitfield did not shift in his seat. He did not blink unusually. He simply looked at Richard and said, "That is an interesting position for a branch manager to take." Richard smiled, stiffened very slightly. "I just being honest. People appreciate honesty. They do, James said. Though there is a difference between honesty and assumption. You have not asked me a single question about strategy, about results, or about the specific needs of his role. You looked at my age and made a decision. That is not honesty, that is something else entirely. Richard sat up straighter, a smile red crept into the edges of his expression. I am conducting this interview the way I conduct all my interviews. I see, James said, and how many qualified candidates have walked out of this office feeling dismissed before they had the chance to speak? That is not your concern. Perhaps not, James said, but it is someone's. Richard stood up. The conversation, as far as he was concerned, was over. James, I appreciate you coming in. I will be frank with you. This position requires energy, cultural awareness, and a certain image. I do not think you are the right fit. Donna can validate your parking on the way out. James did not stand. He remained in the chair, hands resting in his lap, expression unchanged. I would like to stay a little longer, he said. Richard stared at him. I beg your pardon. I said, I would like to stay. I'm not finished. The air in the glass office changed in a way that was hard to name. Richard was not accustomed to this. People left when he told them to leave. People apologized when he looked at them with that expression. This man was doing neither. Sir, Richard said, his voice dropping to its warning register. I have been very polite. Do not make this uncomfortable. You have not been polite, James said simply. You dismissed my experience with 60 seconds. You made a comment about my age. You have not looked at my resume beyond a 4-second glance. That is not politeness, that is performance. Outside the glass, Priya had completely stopped returning to work. Donna had found a reason to stand near the filing cabinet closest to the office. Two other staff members had quickly swiveled their chairs. Nobody spoke, nobody interfered, but everyone was watching. Richard walked to his office door and opened it. I am going to ask you one final time to leave. If you do not, I will have security escort you out. James looked at him for a long moment, then he looked past Richard, through the glass wall at the open office floor, at Priya, at Donna, at the junior staff sitting very still at the desks. Something passed across his face, not anger, not satisfaction, something greater than both. He reached into the breast pocket of his grey jacket and placed a small card on Richard's desk. Richard looked down at it. The card was simple, white, clean font, 4 lines. Gerard Sutton, founder and chief executive officer, Sutton Group Holdings, parent company Holloway and Grant Communications. Richard read it once, then he read it again. His hand, still holding the office door open, did not move. James Gerald remained seated, watching Richard with the same calm expression he had worn since the moment he stepped off the elevator. Close the door, Richard, he said quickly. We still have quite a bit to talk about. Richard closed the door. It was the slowest he had ever moved in his professional life. His hand stayed on the handle for a moment longer than necessary, as if the door itself was the only solid thing left in the room. He turned around and looked at the card again, sitting on his desk like a small, quick bomb. Gerard Sutton did not rush him. He sat in that chair the same way he had sat in its silence since the beginning, still composed, entirely unbothered by the silence stretching between them. This is not real, Richard said finally. Pick up the card, Gerard replied, turn it over. Richard did. On the back was a number, an internal extension, one of the private lines that only board members and executive leadership had access to. Richard knew that number. He had seen it once, one on a memo 2 years ago, and had stored it in the back of his mind the way people store information they hope never becomes relevant. His face, always so composed, always so certain, did something it rarely did. It fell. He started, then stopped, then started again. I had no idea who you are. I had no idea who you are. You have to understand that. I understand it perfectly, Gerard said. That was the point. Richard moved toward his desk but did not sit. He stood behind his chair instead, holding the back of it with both hands. I was simply conducting the interview the way I always conduct interviews. I was being direct, honest. You are being cruel, Gerard said. The word landed without drama, without raised voice, without any performance at all. It landed the way true things land clearly. You dismissed a candidate based on age before a single substantive question was asked. You used language designed to embarrass rather than evaluate. And before I arrived, I stood in your open office floor for 4 minutes and watched you humiliate a member of your team in front of her colleagues over a document formatting issue. Richard's grip on the chair tightened. Priya's work has been consistently below standard. Priya Nair, Gerard said. You received the highest internal performance scores on this floor for 3 consecutive years. I reviewed her file this morning before I came in. The silence that followed had a different quality than the ones before it. Richard opened his mouth, closed it. Sit down, Richard, Gerard said. And Richard, for the first time in a very long time, did exactly what someone else told him to do without argument. Gerard stood now, which was a quick kind of shift, not dramatic, not theatrical, just a natural change of position. He walked to the glass wall and looked out at the office floor. Priya was at her desk, Donna was at reception, the junior staff had returned to their screens. Everything looked normal from the outside, but Gerald had spent enough years reading rooms to know that normal looking and healthy were 2 very different things. I built this company 23 years ago, Gerard said, still looking out at the floor, not because I wanted power, because I believed that a workplace could be a place where people were treated with dignity. Their talent was recognized regardless of what it looked like, where leadership meant lifting people up, not keeping them afraid. He turned back to Richard. What I saw today is not what I built. Richard exhaled slowly. Something in his posture was changing, the stiffness leaving, but not replaced by anything good, just a kind of deflation. I have delivered results for this branch. Our numbers are strong. Client retention is up 11%. Numbers matter, Gerard agreed, and people matter more. One does not cancel out the other. A branch can hit every target and still be broken. Yours is. I can't change, Richard said. The words came out quickly, almost reflexively. Give me a timeline. Give me a performance review structure. I will work with HR. I will change the way I communicate. I will apologize to Priya personally. Gerard looked at him for a long moment. Do you know what the most honest thing you have said since I walked in is? He asked. Richard shook his head slightly. Nothing. Gerard said, nothing you have said has been full honest. Every response has been a negotiation. Even now, when everything is visible, you are calculating. You are not thinking about Priya, you are thinking about your position. Richard said nothing because there was nothing to say to something that was completely true. Gerard walked to the office door and opened it wide so that the floor could see. He gestured toward Donna first. "Could you ask Priya Nair to come in, please?" Donna looked at Richard once, then back at Gerard and nodded without hesitation. She walked quickly to Priya's desk and spoke quickly. Priya looked up, glanced at the office and stood. She walked in with the careful posture of someone who has learned to enter difficult rooms without showing how difficult they are. Gerard extended his hand. "Priya, my name is Gerard Sutton. I am the CEO of Sutton Group of Holdings." Priya shook his hand slowly. Her eyes moved to Richard, then back to Gerard. "I have been reviewing the performance records for this branch," Gerard continued. "Your work is exceptional. Your patience under poor condition is something I have no right to ask of anyone. I'm sorry that this environment was allowed to continue as long as it did." Priya blinked once, twice. She did not cry, but something behind her eyes shifted. The way things shift when someone finally says the thing you have been waiting years to hear. "Thank you," she said quickly. Gerard nodded. Then he looked at Richard one final time. "Richard, your employment with Holloway and Grant Communications ends today. HR will be in contempt. Regarding the former process, I ask that you collect your personal belongings and exit the building by noon." Richard stood very still. "You build strong numbers," Gerard said not unkindly. I hope you use this as the moment you decide to build something better in yourself as well." He did not wait for a response. He walked out of the glass office into the open floor and stood at the center of the room. The whole team was watching now, not pretending otherwise. "Good morning, everyone," Gerard said. "My name is Gerard Sutton. I own this company, and starting today, things are going to be very different on this floor." Nobody clapped, nobody cheered, but Donna smiled, and Priya, standing in the doorway of the glass office, straightened her shoulders for the first time in 2 years. That was enough. That was, in fact, everything. Thank you so much.